Welcome to lesson 4 of Learning HTML course for absolute beginners. In this lesson, we are going to look at HTML head element and how to include metadata in HTML document. Topics we are going to cover include but not limited to adding HTML title, specifying your HTML document metadata, adding custom icon known as the favicon to your HTML site, adding CSS to HTML document, and also setting the primary language of your HTML document. I've also shared links to other related resources to this video in the video description below. Good people, by the end of this video, you should have a clear understanding of HTML head element, its purpose, the important items it contains, and what effect it can have on HTML document. Good people, from our previous topic where we looked at getting started with HTML, we learned that any ideal structure of an HTML document contains 5 basic parts. Number 1 is the doc type. Doc type is a declaration which tells the browser the document type to be expected as HTML. Number 2 parts of an HTML document is the HTML element. HTML element, both the opening one and the closing one, wraps all the content on the page. It is sometimes known as the root element, which defines the beginning and end of the HTML document. Part number 3 of an HTML document is the body tags. Body tags or body element contains all the content that is displayed on the page, including text, images, videos, games, playable audio tracks, or whatever else. The two last parts of an ideal structure, or the second 2 parts of an ideal structures of an HTML document, are the title and head elements. Head element acts as a container for everything you want to include on the HTML page that is not the content the page will show to viewers. This includes keywords and a page description that will appear in search results, CSS to style content, character, set declaration, and more. Then the last part of the HTML document is the title. The title sets the title of the page, which is the title that appears in the browser's tab when the page gets loaded. The page title is also used to describe the page when it's bookmarked. On our today's topic, we are looking at the head element of HTML document. The head element is a container for metadata. But what is metadata? Metadata, in simple term or simple definition, is data about data. And the head element is placed in between the body and the HTML opening tags. HTML metadata is data about the entire HTML document. Metadata is not displayed on the page. Metadata typically defines the document title, character set, style, scripts, and other meta information. That one said, how do you add a title to your HTML document? The title element is a metadata element that defines the overall title of the document, but not the content of the document. The title, for you to define the title of your HTML document, you use the title element wrapped within the opening and the closing tags. Then in between the opening and the closing tag is where the content of your title goes in. For this case, HTML calls for absolute beginners. To let you know, this title must be text only, and it is shown on the browser's title bar or in the page tab. If you hover cursor on the browser's title bar, you will be able to see the title that you have just defined on your HTML document. But what happens if you also bookmark your HTML page? For example, if I click Ctrl D on my computer, this is a shortcut for bookmarking a page. Or if you go to the three dotted on the top right corner of your Chrome browser, then you click on bookmarks and bookmark this tab. When you bookmark that current page of your HTML document, you will see it's being bookmarked based on the title of that page. For this case, HTML calls for absolute beginners. Good people, the title element defines a title on the browser's toolbar, provides a title for the page when it is added to favorite, and also displays a title for the page on the search engine results. The content of a page title is very important for search engine optimization. The title is used by search engine algorithm to decide the order when listing pages in the search results. In the previous topic, on the previous series about internet and web fundamentals, we looked at search engine and how do they work. You can have a look at the video. I have shared the link in the video description. Good people, we learned that heading is an example of an HTML element. That's H1. H1 element is a top level heading to your HTML document. We have just seen that with the title element, it gives title to your HTML page. But on the other hand, the H1 element is a top level heading to your HTML document content and appears on the page once it gets loaded. To mark up title of your page content such as headline. Looking at my example, I have defined a paragraph of H1 element. Give it a name, Introduction to HTML course. So on this page, we are having a title given by the title element as HTML course for absolute beginners. But I'm using H1 elements to give a headline or a heading to this page as Introduction to HTML course. Good people, how do you specify your HTML document metadata? Metadata is data that describe data, and HTML has a way of adding metadata to a document, and that is using the meta element. The meta element is typically used to specify the character set, page description, keyword, author of the document, and viewport setting. From our previous video, when we looked at getting started with HTML, we saw that meta element is an example of a void element, in that it doesn't have to have both the opening and the closing tags. It opens itself and also gets closed itself. The metadata will not be displayed on the page, but it's used by browsers. For example, how to display content or load page. It can also be used by search engine, that's through the keywords and other web services. Good people, if you go to Google and search W3 Schools online web tutorials, in your favorite search engine, for example, in my case, I'm using Google, you will notice the description and the title element content is used in the search result. So any information about your page metadata is very important because it plays a very important role on search engine. So how do you define or how do you specify your HTML document metadata? For you to define the character set of your document, you use the meta element like this, then you give an attribute name of character set and a value of UTF-8, then you close this element. Character set specify the document's character encoding the document is permitted to use. UTF-8 is a universal character set that includes pretty much any character from any human language. For you to define the keywords of your HTML document that is used for search engine, you do like this. Then you give the name, the attribute name as keywords like this. Then the content of your metadata, for example, this is HTML. Show me also preparing a tutorial for CSS, JavaScript like this. Then you make sure you close your meta element. For you to define the description of your web page or what your web page is all about, you do like this meta, then you give it an attribute name with the value description, then you enter the content of the description, for example, free HTML course for absolute beginners. Then you make sure you close your meta element. For you to define the author of your page, you do like this meta, give the meta name as author like this, then you give it the content, basically the name of the author, that's Anwar. Then you make sure you close your meta element. Good people, if you want your HTML document to keep on refreshing after every 30 seconds, you define your meta, give it an attribute name of HTTP equivalent with the value of refresh. Then under the content, you enter the number of seconds that you want your page to refresh after. In this case, that is 30 seconds. If you want to set the viewport to make your website look good on all devices, what are you going to do? Use the meta, give it the attribute value name of viewport, then under the content, you enter device, that's width is equal to device width and initial scale as 1.0, and make sure you do close. Good people, supposing you want to define the base URL for your HTML web page, the base element specifies the base URL and target for all relative URLs in a page, and there can only be one single base element in an HTML document. So for you to specify, you use the base element, then you give the attribute name of href, then you enter your base URL. For my instance, since I'm using HTTP, that's the local host, that is 127.0.0.1. I'm running my local server on port number 5500. Then the second attribute that you give to this base URL defines how you want your links to be opened. You give it an attribute of target. For an instance, I want all my URL to open in a blank page. Then as usual, you close this void element. So good people, this is how you define the base URL for your HTML page. You use the base element, you give it an attribute of href, then enter your URL, the URL that you want to be your base URL, then give it a target value that you wish your links to be opening. Also, to expound on the same, I've gone to my Visual Studio Code, I've created a folder by the name images, and I've pasted here an image that I've just downloaded from the internet. I've also created another folder by the name pages, and within this pages folder, I've created a new HTML document and given it the name about.html. Then here I've created within this new HTML document, I've pasted in some code here with the heading one that describe the heading of the page as about. To expound more on base URL, I have used the image tag img to call this image on HTML page, or to display this image on HTML page, and have given it a width of 300 pixels so that it can be able to fit on this page. Good people, in our previous video that I have shared a link in this video description, we learned about HTML elements and HTML attributes. IMG is also an example of a void element. If you have not looked at that video, please check on the video description below and take some time and look at that video. We also looked at how you can define a link to another document or to another page. Good people, in this paragraph where I've used the img element to display this cat image on this HTML page, you will notice that we have only specified the relative address. That's images/cat.png represent the relative address of this image. Since we have already specified the base URL in our head section, this is the base URL. Good people, this relative address of this cat image will automatically be concatenated with the base URL we have defined on our header section, and this is how the final URL is going to appear. Good people, with this paragraph where I'm defining the anchor tag, or I'm creating a link inside the paragraph tags, this link that leads to about that HTML page I've created inside the pages folder, you will notice that if you try to click on this link like this link opens in a new window, even if it has no any target that's _blank attribute. Look at how I have defined this link. Under normal circumstance, you will expect that we give it the target value, that's the target value of blank. But because we have already defined the target value on our base URL, the link will automatically open in a new window based on the value that you have given our base URL, like this. Good people, today I want us to look at HTML favicon. A favicon basically is a small image displayed next to the page title in the browser's tab. It is displayed to the left of the page title in the browser's tab. For example, in this case, I'm on w3schools.com website. If you look at the left of the browser's title, you will see there's a very small image, green in colored, that I think is the color for W3 schools. And this is what is called the favicon. How do you create a favicon for your website? There are many ways of creating favicon for your website. On my case, I use a website that's favicon-generator.org. If you go to this page, you will be told generate your own favicon icon. You will be required to upload an image. Choose an image from your computer. After you have chosen your image, you will click create favicon icon. Then once you have done like that, you can be able to download the generated favicon icon. It will be saved in your computer. The downloads page, this will be a zipped file. Right click on it, extract, open the extracted folder. Then you will see several images, several favicon that are generated depending on the kind of platform that you're developing application for. For instance, this is HTML. I want to be displayed on my HTML browser. So this is the favicon that I have used or that I have created from this website. So this is how you can use this favicon-generator.org to create your own favicon for your website. Good people, for you to add favicon to your HTML web page, you use the link element. Link element is also an example of a void element. You give it the attribute of rel and give it the value of icon. Then href attribute favicon.icon, give it type of image /x -icon. So this favicon.icon is the name of the favicon that we generated from the previous website, and I've ensured that I have placed this image in the same folder as my index.html. If you place it in another folder, just ensure that you give the link to the correct path. But one thing that I have discovered with HTML5, so long as you have placed that favicon in the same folder as your index.html file, you don't have to define it. You don't have to define its link or its path on the head element. It's automatically displayed. For example, for my case, I have not defined the path to my favicon, but since I've placed it in the same folder as my index.html and have given it the name favicon.icon, look at this name, favicon.icon, so my HTML document will automatically display it on the titles bar. Good people, how do you add CSS to your HTML document? You can use the style element to define style information for a single HTML page. When you're using this style element, that style information that is defined there only applies to that current HTML page. For example, I want to make my body or the body of this HTML page to be green in color, and I want to make my H1 tag, introduction to HTML course, to be white in color. So I'm going to use the style element, the opening and the closing tag. Then in between the opening and the closing tag of my HTML style element, I'm giving the body element the background color of green. Then I'm giving the H1 element its color as white. So this is how you use this style element to define style within your HTML document. Good people, the link tag can also be used to link to external style sheet. With the previous example, we use the style element to define the style information for that particular page. But you can also use the link tag to link to an external style sheet. And we saw that when you use the style information, the styling information that is defined inside the style element is only applied within that particular HTML page. But what if you want to use the same style information in other pages? This is where the concept of external style sheet comes in. Within my project folder, I have created that's a CSS file with the name style.css, and I've pasted the previous style information we have just looked. That's give it the body and give it the color of green, the H1 give it the color of white. For me to link to that external style sheet that I have just created in my project folder, within the head element, I am going to use the link tag to link to that style.css. I give it the link, I use the link tag, use the rel attribute and give it the attribute value of style sheet, and use the href attribute the value of style.css. This style.css is the style that I have defined inside this project folder. If I will have placed it maybe in another folder or inside another folder within the same project folder, ensure that you give the correct file path. Just to wrap up, you can use the style element within the head element to define style information for your HTML page, and if you do that, that particular style information will only appear within that HTML page. You can also use the link tag to define an external style sheet and link it to your HTML page. Good people, how do you include client-side JavaScript into HTML document? In the previous video, we looked at that. We can use the style element to include CSS into your HTML page. If you want to include JavaScript into your HTML page, then use the script element. In this case, I want us to look on how we can change the content of our H1 element. That's the heading one. That's introduction to HTML course, to read welcome to HTML course, and we change this content on a button click. So below H1 element, I am going to define a button. Then I give it a type of button. Then I give it an attribute of on click. When a user clicks on this button, I want a function, a JavaScript function we are going to define to be executed Then I close the button. I give it name, for example, press, or let me say, click me. So in this case, I want when a user clicks on this button, my function, this is a JavaScript function that we're going to define inside the script element to be executed or to be called, and using the script defined inside this function to change the content of introduction to HTML course to read welcome to HTML course. As I have said, we can use this script element to define the client-side JavaScript inside an HTML document. So in this case, I have used the script element. Then inside this script element, I have defined a JavaScript function, given it a name, my function, and whatever I'm telling this function is to find an ID of intro and change its in HTML or its content to welcome to HTML. And this function gets called or gets executed whenever a user clicks on this button, and I've used an attribute on click to call this function. So when a user clicks on this function, these scripts get executed. And what does this script does? It changes the content of an element within our document that's given an ID intro, changes the content to welcome to HTML course. So if I click on this button like this, you will see automatically the content, the previous content, introduction to HTML, changes to welcome to HTML. Good people, the script element can also be used inside header element and should include a src attribute containing the part of the JavaScript you want to load, and defer, which basically instructs the browser to load the JavaScript after the page has finished passing the HTML. Good people, just the way we looked at HTML, we can use the link tag to call an external style sheet or an external CSS. The same applies to JavaScript. If you want to call to include an external JavaScript, instead of embedding the same JavaScript within the same header section of the same or of the current HTML page, you can use the script element and give it some attribute that will lead to the external script that you have just defined. With my case, I've gone to my project folder, created a file that's script.js. JS is an extension for JavaScript. Then inside that file, I've created my function, the same function that we have just seen in our previous section. Then I've come to my index.html file. Since I want to link it as an external script, I'm going to use the script element. So how now do you link to that file that you have just created? So I'm going to use the script tag. So I define the script tag. I give it an src value, which is equal to the name, the path to my JavaScript file. In this case, it's script.js. Script.js is placed in the same folder as my index.html file. And because I want my HTML content to load fast before the JavaScript is loaded, so I'm going to use the defer attribute. Then after I've done like that, I will just close my script element. So by doing like this, I have linked that script.js file as an external JavaScript to this current HTML, and I can be able to reuse this script.js file in other HTML document. So if I try to click like this, the content will still be able to change as expected. How do you set the primary language for your HTML document? You can set the primary language for your HTML document by adding the lang attribute to the opening HTML tag. So this is our opening HTML tag. This is where you place your lang attribute, and this is where you define your document language. For my case, I'm using English for the United States. This is useful in many ways, as your HTML document will be indexed more effectively by search engine if its language is set to allowing it to appear correctly in language specific result. So good people, if you want to define the primary language for your HTML document, you do it at the beginning of your HTML document. Inside the opening HTML tag, you use the lang attribute and you give it the value that is equivalent to the language that you want your HTML page to be ranked with.